All right. Hi, everyone. As you know, my name is Paulina Rozenberg, and I have been doing a photography psychology project. So as a little girl, I've been dragged around all my life by my mother from one museum to another, and I've really had to learn to enjoy art rather than to just sit and let it pass by me, and because I've been surrounded by it so much. And so what this means that I've had to learn to enjoy art is that art, you cannot experience it passively. You have to be engaged with it. What art is a conversation first and foremost. So no one goes in automatically with an open mind. I mean, some people do, but sometimes art takes time to resonate and people need to sit with it and understand it in order to experience its emotional, psychological implications. So, of course, everyone interprets things subjectively, and there's no one right way to experience art. Now, you may not know this, but my project has been sort of surrounded by some controversy. As I had been creating my images that you see rolling behind me, I was planning to have them exhibited maybe in the school or in a place that's affiliated with the school like the New Art Center. And what happened was, as people saw these big images of students in the school, of girls that are adolescent, 18 years old, but still young girls, they became sort of fearful, worried about what the implications might mean. As you see, there's a lot of skin. There's no clothes, but however, there's no nudity as well. As the images kept coming out of the big printer, 4 feet by about 3 feet wide, people started looking and sort of questioning if this was even allowed in a place, in an institution such as this. And so what happened was that people became involved, and I had to get signatures from parents and things like that. But what this controversy sort of shows is that people get affected by emotions, by the emotions that an image may show them, may make them experience. So what happened was that this person that saw this image, they reacted to it. And it is very natural to react, strongly. It is very natural to see the skin and sort of question what it means, even though there is in fact, no true nudity. There is no implications. When I was creating the images, my emotions were completely different from this person who saw it and was worried that it was lascivious in some way. And so what happened to me is that I was able to experience a new perspective on my own imagery. And I was able to show a new perspective to someone else. And so, even though the origin of emotion is unknown, we are able to see the way it changes our behavior, the way we react to things is because of our emotions, and these emotions are sort of instilled in us through our eyes, through our visual sort of perception. And so this controversy sort of happened after a class I had. I had presented to a class all my images, and it was Mr. Wallace's G-Block class, and everyone saw them, and these students were absolutely taken aback perhaps by the imagery, but they had no idea that there was any sort of implication. They didn't feel the implication of sexuality or anything like that. They saw it first and foremost as art because they came in with an open mind and they let the images wash over them. And what they got to do is they wrote about the images, how it made them feel, and most of my responses were, these images made me feel as if I was part of the photograph. People, when referring to a specific image, if there was maybe a girl in a corner lonely, hugging herself, they said, I felt her loneliness. I didn't understand why, and I didn't understand how just this human figure was able to make me feel the way feel this way, but just looking at it, I felt lonely, I felt afraid, I felt, worried for my being. And so these images were created by because these images were first and foremost created because of a survey that I had taken. And what the survey entailed was that people would write down what they were most afraid of. And what they were most afraid of was things like loneliness, these incredible emotionally powerful things. They were afraid of loss. They were afraid of eternity. These things were not tangible. These things were purely psychological. And I found that once you interpreted these emotions into something visual, it was all that much more powerful. And so why the emotion fear as opposed to anything else? Because fear is something that is irrational. And as sort of a definition, emotions are pretty irrational. And so when you take this sort of strong, irrational emotion and create an image, people find it as though it is tangible, as though it is something that they can control, that they can have in their possession and sort of beat it and see that everyone else has the same feelings that they do. What's wonderful about emotions and having the conversation with a photograph is that the emotions are no longer something to be something that you can't show. These are things that you can sort of use as a way to connect with other people. This is a way that a person can have the conversation with the artist, with the photograph. I mean, in the case of the photograph, the viewer is kind of the voyeur. They view the intimate, sort of emotional, action between the artist and what they are taking. And so this connection resonates within us, and we can feel it. It is transcendent because humans are very empathetic. In fact, empathy is something that's very interesting. It is not necessarily completely selfless. We are sort of encompassed by it because we want to feel a connection with other people, because what most psychological problems and things like that come about because of fears that we have, that we think, oh, we're alone in this, no one else can feel the way we do. But in fact, we see on a daily basis that there's no strange emotion. Everyone has felt the way you have felt before. And what's interesting is that emotions are not necessarily, they are unique to everyone, but they are not necessarily specific to a certain person. And people can look at the image and feel on the subconscious level what the perhaps person or object is insinuating. And so I have, as you see, all female models, and that is because there's sort of a stereotype that women feel emotions stronger. They are able to express their emotions more. Of course, this is not necessarily true. This is not necessarily, again, it's a stereotype. But I sort of played upon this idea, and I used that stereotype as a way to have a more powerful emotional reaction. And people will see this and sort of take away that this is an emotional project. My process was using natural light. I didn't want any interference. I wanted only the body and the viewer to interact. I didn't want anything sort of getting in the way of the photograph's emotion and the viewer and the conversation that they're having. When I was creating my book, I used solely the idea of the fears, and I was able to sort of explain why these fears, are innate in people, and why they affect us so in sort of the physical, metaphorical, spiritual, emotional sense. And I was able to understand that there is nothing that can stop an individual from feeling how they feel and from sort of subconsciously expressing their fears in their behaviors. And what that means, like in the controversy, people innately sort of push their own ideas onto a picture, and they are then sort of not able to restrict their sort of emotions. They're unable to sort of let go of what the implication means, and they're therefore sort of forced into an emotional state, whatever it may be. Because what an artist really wants is a reaction. They don't necessarily just want a passive sort of glance at their picture. But even if there's a passive glance at the picture, a reaction is established, even if it's not necessarily noticed in the conscious mind or by other people. It is always sort of in the back of the person's mind, and there's no image that doesn't stick with a human in some way or another. And so when the models were sort of posing for me, I told them to be natural. I didn't tell them what the fear was, but I sort of guided them, and they were able to have their subconscious impression resonate through the image. And so what this shows is that subconscious is very powerful, and because it is not something that we can see, not something that we can control, it is also very dangerous. But with imagery, since it is able to so easily manipulate what we do not understand, people can experience it, and through the experience of art, they are able to begin to understand their subconscious, begin to control what it is that's going on, because they are being so positively and freely, they're able to freely express it. And so when an artist is making their photograph, what they really have to think about is the implications of what they are making. They have to understand that not everyone will have the same reaction, but the fact that they can use the subconscious, the power of the reality of a photograph in order to alter the subconscious, they are able to more so sort of funnel in what they wish the viewer to feel. And with this, people can start to understand how the artist's mind works, how the photograph is so individual and sort of unique to an artist, and the person is then able to feel the same emotions as the artist. They're able to play freely within their subconscious. And when you use this as sort of a way to make a therapy or anything like that, when you use this sort of idea that a visual can manipulate the subconscious, you then are able to find a connection with the human that you're talking to, and you are able to see the way that their subconscious works, and that they are reacting, and that the conscious reactions are sort of an aftermath and like a product of the subconscious feelings. And so when a human looks at a photograph such as this, we find that, so in the photograph there's a woman with a hand over the mouth. And her face is blank. You don't know what she's thinking, but we sort of interpret it in a way that she is being, well, in my interpretation, she is being sort of stifled. She is not happy because of the image. I don't feel happy, and I don't see that there is something that can sort of, there is not anything there that will prove to me any other way that she is happy. And when you sort of interpret it, you see that, in fact, there's nothing in the image to disprove that she is happy or not happy. But I am anyway sort of posing my own emotional and past interpretations of it onto the image. Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
The hand over her mouth, is it her hand over her mouth?
There's someone, the hand is coming as if from nowhere, from above.
Nowhere, okay.
And it could be, I mean, I don't think it's her hand. I don't think she could possibly.
When you describe it, didn't.
Right.
Didn't it was her hand.
Yes, and it is a profile view of her with her hand, with the hand coming from above over her mouth.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so when an artist is able to use emotions as a way to manipulate sort of the mind, it is much easier for them to get their message across, to incite change in anything, in the person, in the world, and anything such as that. And the human is then able to use their subconscious as a way to let their mind sort of free, to let go of any emotional trauma or anything like that. They're able to be on another level with the art. It just sort of washes over you. It takes your eyes and your mind through your eyes, and it gets interpreted, and you are able to just feel without any sort of stress, because you know that there are other people that feel the same way, and it's just more of a connection than anything else. Thank you.
Are you taking questions?
Yes, absolutely. Any questions?
Okay. I just question, the people whom you photographed as young people, are they all students at North?
Yes.
Were they, so they're all North students?
Yes.
And you mentioned before, at some point it became a little bit controversial, so I presume you had to have either them or their parents to sign some type of release law.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about, because when you're trying to do a project that's so visually stimulating, there's a research component to this too. So how does one conduct research to try to articulate what you're saying is it's unable to be expressed? So like, who were some of your influences? What did you find in the research?
Absolutely. So in my research, I found this incredible study of two men from UCLA who took beverages and took the human faces in an angry and a happy and a neutral sort of expression. And that was, of course, interpreted by the participant. And what happened was that the participant was asked if they were thirsty, and they were asked to rate the beverage on, how good it was and how much money they would pay. And so the thirsty participants that saw a happy face were much more willing, of course, to pay more money for the beverage, and more willing to say that it was good. And the people that were like the subliminal emotions, that was sort of an angry sort of emotion, they were less willing, even if they were thirsty, they thought the beverage was not as good as the people that were subjected to a happy face, and they were willing to pay much less for the beverage. So that sort of proved that on a subconscious level, these faces, these images sort of permeate through us. And these people they rated their emotional sort of, whatever their emotions were before they started to drink, and they were not, after they saw the image, and they were not influenced directly on the conscious level by the faces.
One more question.
Absolutely.
You said that you gave out a survey early on, and then you found that some of the things that people's most common fears were eternity, loneliness, structure, and you kind of identified those in your images. Did you hypothesize that those would be the emotions and the kind of responses that you would get, and they were validated by the survey? Or did you not know what you were going to expect, and then you based the actual images that you shot off of what people said?
So I had no idea what to expect. Of course, I have my own fears and my answers to the survey questions that I gave out, but in fact, I went in with an open mind, because every emotion is subjective and every fear is subjective. But so after I went through the 100 responses that I got, and I took commonalities throughout. There was about 9, which I showcase in the book: loss, loneliness, eternity, things like that, and I based my images around that.
So you took a series of images, just tabula rasa,
Mhm.
and you had no communication with your models, or you did not give them any specific direction, you were just shooting?
So I gave them some direction. I had some sort of poses that I felt had some emotional implications. I didn't know exactly which fear they would fit into necessarily, and then I went through the results and I had about 3,000 images at first, and I have 36 now. And so I took the images and I put them into the categories that I found, the commonalities that were there.
So they were aware this was a fear project?
They were not aware. They were aware that this is an emotion project.
Okay. It's very hard to listen while there's such compelling images. Perhaps Dr. Kiki didn't have the same distraction.
No, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking, let me draw a little metaphor and so on and so forth. Sometimes people will say to me, you know, I'll tell, if I may, a little anecdote. And I was just speaking to Ms. Danberg earlier about, I spent some time in Australia, and sometimes people ask me what I can see, what I can't see. And I see very little. I can see some light and so on. But sometimes when people ask me, you know, what's one of your favorite places where you've been and why? One of my favorite places was sitting by Sydney Harbor at a sunset. And the overall, that experience, the smell of the air, the sounds and so on. And sometimes people think that because someone is blind or visually impaired, we have an incomplete aesthetic. And we don't have anything, we have our own aesthetic. And a woman once said to me, well, it's a shame you couldn't see that sunset. I don't think I missed a thing, okay? Having said that, to kind of come here to these photographs, as you were speaking, Paulina, I was listening very intently to you. No reflection on my sighted colleagues. They may not have been listening as intently.
That's my point.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that either of our aesthetics is any better or any poorer, or I hear any better. That's a misnomer. The blind people hear better or smell better. I mean, we may use it more. So, I enjoyed what you said. It made sense to me. That misnomer about incomplete aesthetic, just as an aside, people maybe find interesting. Until 1980 in Massachusetts, blind people were prohibited from serving on a jury. For that specific reason, you wouldn't be able to observe people's, you know, non-verbal communication, judge evidence, et cetera, well, that law has been changed. So, to a degree, it kind of connects to it. So, I enjoyed your presentation. I feel like I got a lot out of it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Mr.
I have one. And I think this might be the point of your project, but when I was looking at the different images, and I mean, I'd seen them before because we've been working on this for a while, but my question that I was going to ask is, why are the models naked? Would you be able to get a similar effect? Would you be able to accentuate loneliness, loss, eternity without it? Like, if they were clothed, would you have gotten similar feelings? So I'm wondering, like, what your kind of what your mindset was by
Absolutely.
having the models without clothes, and
Absolutely.
I certainly have my reaction to why I think the lack of clothes might have accentuated or worked. But I'm curious kind of to
Right.
hear your take.
So, my theory is that, of course, clothing would, the poses that they are in, perhaps with clothing, would sort of resonate in some way. But in fact, when a body is unclothed, there is sort of a raw, open feeling. They are open to you. You are able to. They're vulnerable. They're not in any way apart from you. And clothing would be sort of a distraction, and you wouldn't be able to really connect on the human level. You see that these people are human. They have, the same skin you have. They have everything. And in terms of the aesthetic, clothes, they distract. They are all different, and people would sort of look at them and be like, why are they wearing that? Maybe that would be the sort of the process. But instead, if it's just a normal human body, there is no process other than, like, this goes in with the visual manipulation. My manipulation was that they did not have the clothing, and you are not able to concentrate on anything else except for that and their sort of position within the image.
Did you consider putting the piece about this being a controversial project at the end of your presentation?
Maybe I should have.
Because as I think about emotion,
Mm-hmm.
that, and as someone like, excuse me, my voice is funny. As someone, like as a teacher and an educator, I think sometimes you intuitively feel as though you're a protector
Mm-hmm.
of children.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear right off the bat that this was controversial, I almost went into that protection mode of
Absolutely.
why would, like, and I wouldn't have thought about it, like, and then
Absolutely.
listening to your piece about emotion, I think it was really interesting because that was a whole different experience
Right,
for
absolutely.
me. But if you had put it at the end,
Yeah.
I wonder if that wouldn't have been in my lens as I,
Absolutely.
you know, that wouldn't have been the lens I was looking through. But a piece of what I was looking through this whole time was that, like,
Right.
I will protect children, I will always,
Right.
if someone felt like this was not okay,
Mm-hmm.
do I feel that way?
Absolutely.
So I wonder if a different audience got that information at the end.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
if
No,
they
you're
would have
absolutely right.
experienced this a little bit differently.
Yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely.
And the images
Makes
are
sense.
gorgeous, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think I would have seen the clothing almost as a barrier.
Yeah. It's a barrier between
Yeah.
the human and the viewer and the image, and that's probably why the students in the class had no interpretation, didn't have the same interpretation as the teacher, because they came into it with an open mind. I didn't let them know anything about the project, and they just saw the images and reacted. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
partly, I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with the project because I was one of Paulina's readers.
Okay.
So that changes my perspective a little bit, but I really appreciated your starting with the controversy because your commentary on that was that you had learned so much, it had opened your eyes and your mind so much to how other people might see your work with a perspective you might not have had before. So I saw that as a growth piece.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that wouldn't have worked at the end, but I personally like that as an introduction, although your protective mode, the mama hen thing.
Yeah, it's my mama bear
I
moment.
can
Yeah.
see, and I have shared with Paulina that some of the images are of my students.
Uh-huh.
And so that was a little weird for me. It wasn't really uncomfortable, it was just different.
Mhm.
Because I suddenly saw them not as my students, but as models in an art project.
Right.
And that was, but I didn't feel protective toward them, I felt like they were in control.
Yeah.
I thought
Absolutely.
you provided a good explanation.
Thank you.
You did, you really did.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
One quick question about the title of your book is Fears and Phantasmagoria. And I know
Yes.
that at the very beginning of this process, the word phantasmagoria, like, I'd used it in a class and then someone said, oh my gosh, I just heard that word. There's just someone who's gonna do a process with phantasmagoria.
Yeah.
And I think of phantasmagoria as that concept of when something that is technically in a dreamlike state or is basically unreal
Mhm.
bleeds its way into reality
Mhm.
or vice versa, and you
Mhm.
can't tell the difference between one or the other anymore. So in what way do you feel like the images that you're showing bleed what's unreal with what's real?
Right.
Qualify the term.
So what I wanted to be the most real aspect of my images is the raw emotion. So the images themselves, although they may not be necessarily categorized as outright surreal, maybe perhaps a little neo-surreal because of the way that some of the hands are they look like they come out of nowhere. There's no way that this kind of image will be natural in everyday life. The girls, it's very deliberate, and usually when you're looking at a photograph, you think, oh, this is a snapshot of what happened. You don't necessarily go in thinking to it that it was manipulated or set up in any way. So the phantasmagoria is the fact that some of the poses that the girls are in, some of the extraneous sort of hands and arms and legs that come in there, and the way that the juxtaposition of the negative space to the bodies is placed is a little dreamlike, unreal things that you may think of, but not necessarily see in everyday life.
Also, the orientation of some of the photographs.
Right,
You're
exactly.
defying gravity because
Exactly.
you presented it upside down or sideways.
Yes, yes,
Which is something as a photographer I noticed right away,
right.
and that made it very surreal.
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, that was, yeah, everything was very intentional.
But thank you for, it does help to, oh, right, that's what you called it.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, how many different students are there in the collection? And
Nine.
how did you recruit them, for lack of a better term?
Right, right. So there were 9 girls. I wanted to have 36. That was my sort of ideal number. I thought I like groups of 4 in terms of the fears, and 9 girls I wanted to have, one for at least every single fear, a different one. That didn't necessarily come out. There are some girls that aren't in every single fear, but there were 9 in total. And how I recruited them was that I had a couple friends who were very close to me, and these people are very emotionally available to me, and I had no fear that they would be reserved in any way and what I asked them to do, and they were very comfortable not having their clothes simply because we are on a very understanding level with each other. So they were not worried that I would manipulate them in any way, that I would, take a picture of them and expose them anyway. They were very trusting of me, and I appreciated that, and that's how I chose my models.
Down to trust.
Exactly.
We talked about this all day, rightly so, but for the sake of the judges to leave time to fill you out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paulina.
Thank you.